Once upon a time, in a village known as Ruby, there lived a young lady whose name was Adamma. She was an only child for many years until her parents gave birth to her sister, Ijeoma, when she was already 20 years old. Adamma was very excited at the birth of her sister. She was tired of being an only child, and so she took very good care of Ijeoma as though she was the one who had birthed her. Adamma and Ijeoma were inseparable despite the age gap. Few years later, Adamma and Ijeoma had gone to the market to sell palm kernels when she saw Nduka, a tall, fine young man. He looked like he was not from her village, as she had never seen him before. He looked more like a city boy. Adamma did not notice that she had been staring at him for too long, until her sister Ijeoma tapped her. She felt so embarrassed, as Nduka had already caught her staring. Nduka walked up to her smiling and introduced himself to her. They became friends very quickly. As Adamma suspected, Nduka was not from her village. He was from a neighboring village named Isakala. However, he had lived in Lagos all his life and had only come back to the village a few weeks ago to start up a palm oil mill where he could produce palm oil from scratch and sell to his customers in Lagos. Nduka began coming to the market every day just so he could spend quality time with Adamma. He loved everything about her, especially how she took very good care of her sister, and he loved the bond that they both shared. Few months later, Adamma and Nduka got married. But prior to the wedding, Adamma had pleaded with Nduka to allow her sister Ijeoma come live with them after they got married, and Nduka had no objections whatsoever. After the wedding, Nduka, Adamma, and Ijeoma all moved to Izakala, Nduka's village. Life seemed to be going very well for them. Nduka and Adamma were still very much in love. They were always playing together or taking a stroll or just simply having a good time over a light refreshment in their home. Nduka had started his palm oil business. He leased a large expanse of land and had already bought equipment and had people working for him. Adamma, on the other hand, was already pregnant and was very supportive of her husband, making sure that the home front was fine. Ijeoma was, however, not settled in her spirit. She was troubled. She could sense that there was something wrong with Izakala village, but she couldn't place a finger on what the problem was. Ijeoma, though she was only 8 years old at the time, behaved like an adult. She had a very strong spirit and could sense when something was wrong. From the very first night she had stepped into Izakala village, it has been from one bad dream to the other, every single night. She sensed that this village, Izakala, was cursed, but she was afraid of telling her sister, so she decided to pay more attention and be more observant. Over the next few months, Ijeoma started noticing that 75% of all the men and women in Izakala had their right arm either amputated or withered. Some even were prosthetic. But she noticed that all the children had complete arms. Even at the market, when she had followed her sister to make her hair, she noticed most of the women made hair with only one hand, as the other hand had been amputated. She also noticed that a larger percentage of the men were idle and irresponsible. They did not go to work or have any source of livelihood, and they lived at the mercy of their wives, who had become the breadwinner in the home. Rather, these men spent all day under different tree shades in the village square, playing chess and drinking away their lives. All these facts made her come to the conclusion that indeed Isakala was cursed. There was no way all this was just a coincidence. She decided to approach her sister with her findings. One day, Adamma and Ijeoma were in the kitchen cooking when Ijeoma busted out and said, "Sister, I think there is something wrong with this village." Adamma turned, looking at her, confused. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Well, aside the fact that since the day I stepped into this village, I have been having bad dreams. Have you not noticed that 75% of both the men and women all have their right arms amputated or withered, and some are even wearing prosthetic? Did you also notice that most of the men are irresponsible? They spend all day sitting and drinking at the village square, and it's their wives that cater for them. There is no way that this is normal or a coincidence. This village must be cursed," Ijeoma said vehemently. Adamma looked at her sister smiling and said, "Ijeoma, you have come again with your stupendous theories. Those whose arms have been amputated or withered must have had an accident or something. Besides, I can call at least 50 persons whose hands are complete. And for the men being lazy, my husband, your uncle, does he look lazy to you? Is he not the one taking care of us and providing for our home? Ijeoma, do not say things you do not know anything about. It might just be a coincidence," Adamma said. Ijeoma grumbled and said, "I don't think so, sister. Remember, Mama used to say, whenever something happens more than once, it is no longer a mistake or a coincidence, but a pattern, and that there is always a reason behind every pattern." Adamma rebuked Ijeoma sharply and said, "That's enough. Ijeoma, I do not want to hear a word of this outside or to anyone before you put me in trouble with my husband's people. They have been nothing but nice to me since we came here." Ijeoma apologized to her sister and said, "I'm sorry, sister," and left immediately. Few months later, Adamma gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She was so happy. Nduka was also very happy. One day, Adamma's friends Chidera and Mama Ngozi had come to visit her and the newborn baby. They discussed several things while carrying and admiring Adamma's baby. Later on, Chidera began to lament on how well her husband was doing in China before he suddenly came back to Nigeria one day, claiming that he was missing home. And Mama Ngozi, on the other hand, narrated how her husband, who had been in South Africa for 7 years and doing very well, suddenly came back home to the village to start a business, and how he had an accident that almost claimed his life, and they spent all the money he came back with for his treatment, but his right hand had to be amputated. Mama Ngozi further stated that all their efforts to raise money and send him back to South Africa had failed woefully. They advised Adamma to pray for her husband every day as they left her home. Immediately they had gone, Ijeoma jumped out from the kitchen and spoke to her sister, saying, "Sister, did I not tell you that this village is cursed? There is something that draws every young man who have left this village and are very successful back here to the village, to render them useless and also take their right hands." Ijeoma, Ijeoma, Adamma shouted, "How many times have I told you not to eavesdrop? And can you please stop with all these your assumptions? Adama said angrily. Sister, Ijeoma responded, I am only being concerned for you and Uncle Nduka. What if it is the same thing that calls the sons of Izakala wherever they are, even if they are abroad, and brings them back to the village, and not only renders them useless, but also collects their right arms? What if it is that same thing that has called Brother Nduka back to the village to start a factory, so as to render him useless and even take his right arm? Remember what Mama used to say, if something happens once, it is a mistake. But if it happens twice, then it's a pattern. Will you shut up? Adama shouted. Ijeoma, I have had just enough of your theories. If you're tired of staying in Izakala, just let me know. And first thing tomorrow, I will bundle you back home. Ijeoma apologized again to her sister and left. But she was still very much convinced that Izakala was a cursed village, and she was not going to let anything happen to her sister or her sister's husband. However, she decided not to bring up this matter with her sister anymore. One day, several months later, Nduka had rushed home, frantic and screaming, Ebugomo, Awalamo, Chimo, whoever offended. He was shedding tears like a baby. Adama and Ijeoma rushed outside scared. What is it? What is it? Adama asked, afraid. Nduka, after several persuasions from Adama, narrated how his palm oil mill had caught fire and how his whole business had burnt to the ground. Adama was very shocked. Ijeoma too, and they all wailed with Nduka. Nduka had put in his life savings in the business venture and had even taken a loan too. So not only did he just lose all his life savings, but he was also now in a lot of debts. The weeks that followed were filled with sadness in Nduka's home. One day, Ijeoma mustered courage and approached her uncle and said, Uncle, I know I am only a child, but please listen to me. I think all that has happened to you is spiritual. I think your village is cursed. Nduka looked at her, shocked. Why do you say so? He asked. Uncle, I have noticed that a large number of the men and women have their right arms amputated, and how all the men who were successful in the city mysteriously came back home to the village and became poor and also lose their arm. It cannot be a coincidence, Uncle. I spoke to my sister, but she said I should never say a word about this to anyone. Nduka looked at her shocked. He was surprised at her level of intelligence, comprehension, and how observant she was. Weeks later, Nduka couldn't stop thinking about what Ijeoma had told him. So he reached out to some of the men in his age grade and told them what Ijeoma had said. So they all decided to go see the chief priest of their village. After several consultations with the gods, the priest told them that indeed Ijeoma was right. As many years ago, in the days of their ancestors, a young man named Uche, who was not from Izakala, but had only visited his friend who was from Izakala village, and had decided to spend the night. And the first night he slept in Izakala's village, the princess was raped, and the king was furious, looking frantically for the culprits that then defiled his daughter. He ordered his guards to search all the houses in the kingdom the following day and bring any stranger they found. Uche, the stranger, was picked up, and all his pleas fell on deaf ears, as the king was determined to avenge his daughter's honor. The king ordered that his arms be cut off for daring to touch his daughter, and he was thereafter buried alive. Before Uche died, he laid a curse on Izakala village that all men and women in Izakala would have their hands amputated at one time or the other in their life. He also cursed them that as he was cut off in his prime, that all their sons and daughters, once they began to prosper, would suddenly find their way back to the village, and their lives would be rendered useless. The chief priest told them that they had to offer a sacrifice to appease Uche's spirits. If not, no matter where they went to, whenever they started becoming successful, he would call back their spirits to Izakala to exact vengeance on them. The villagers gathered together and provided all that the chief priest had requested, and the chief priest offered the sacrifices, and Izakala village was set free. Unduka and Adamma were so proud of Ijeoma for listening to her spirits. Unduka had, however, lost all he had in Izakala, so he packed up his family and relocated back to Lagos to start life from the scratch again. At least, now he was no longer under any curse, and his generation yet unborn would not have to carry a curse hanging around their destinies. The moral lesson of this story is that we must pay attention to certain patterns in our lives. Not everything is a coincidence, and some of our problems are more spiritual than we know it. Thank you for watching my story. Please share with me what you learned from the story in the comment section. And if you found the story interesting, please support my small channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. Until I come your way again with more interesting stories, bye!